and welcome Katrina. Katrina, we were in a World Values Day planning meeting and the topic of politics and values came up. And we were both kind of curious, and other people may be a bit more resistant. And so we've decided to have this chat today to give people an insight into your view of the relationship between politics and values. And the reason that you're a really great person to ask about it is that you have had a significant career in this area of politics, and also you're hugely interested in the topic of values. So to start off with, could you just explain to people that are watching slash listening how you got into politics in the first place and what personal values drove that decision and direction?
Okay, so I didn't intentionally get into politics. I don't think that anyone does. I think that you find your way into politics, and you find your way into politics because you have values. I think that the way that politics is structured and the way that the political system is structured, when you enter into it, it's a big beast, and you want to make a difference, and you want to try your hardest to instill values in that system. And it's sometimes incredibly difficult, but I think everyone starts out with the same intentions. And I don't, and I mean that from everyone that I've worked with globally, from politicians across the world. It's not just one country or another country, it's multiple countries that I've worked with politicians. So, what inspired me to get into politics? Well, I'll be honest, I started out in public relations and realized that it was a fickle business. And it was advertising, and I didn't enjoy it. I ended up working with the handover of the Millennium Dome from Anschutz Entertainment Group to Anschutz Entertainment Group from government. There was a lot of Blair bashing at the time, and then after that happened, I was asked to step into a political arena because I was very good at stakeholder engagement, and I was very good at managing expectations and managing people's expectations and making sure that everybody had a voice. So that value of being heard and listened to was incredibly important to me, and it was something that was lacking at that time. And so I don't think that I don't know anyone who has doesn't feel as if they get dragged into politics,
Okay. And
and
you've
it feels
mentioned,
like a duty.
okay. And you've mentioned both politics and values in what you were just talking to there. And I'm curious in your career about a time where you've had to deal with the conflict between the two. So the pressure of a political situation, excuse me, and being true to your values. Can you think of a time when you've had to cope with that conflict?
Yes, very easily. I It's one of the reasons that I stepped away from British politics. I didn't like the way that the Brexit was being managed or handled. I didn't think that it was being managed transparently. I didn't think that people were getting all of the information that they needed, and I didn't think that those decisions were being made from a bottom-up perspective. Now, um, you have to understand politics. If you, from a top-down perspective, it's like an autocracy, and from a bottom-up perspective, it's a democracy. And I was concerned that that the way that Brexit was managed wasn't done properly. That's why I stepped away.
Okay. And you're touching there on the relationship between the general public and people in politics, people in positions of power. And we live in an age now where there's increasing polarization and mistrust. So, what role do you think values can play in rebuilding that trust between politicians and the general public?
Oh, um, I think that there's a pre-question to that, Alan, um, because I don't think that politics is structured around values at the moment, and I think that it's structured around economics. And when it's structured around economics and finance, these things are measurable. Um, and when you've got economics and finance that are measurable, then it makes them easy to delineate when you're sitting in a political environment because it means that you're able to say this bit got better a little bit in 5 minutes, and a minister gets to make an announcement of some description. With values, it's really difficult to measure those things. And it's the measurability of them that makes it really, really challenging. So I think with values, I think that values are meant to be in politics, but they're just not measurable in that way that they can be incrementally reported.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the challenge. It's not that they shouldn't be there. It's that it's hard for them to be there.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing that I would say on that. Sorry, you want to come back to me on that one?
Yeah, so I'm curious to understand how you think they could be made more explicit and measurable because I agree with you, and most of my work is in the corporate world, and it's been through the same journey. Originally corporates measured themselves purely on finance, many still do, but increasingly corporate organizations are measuring themselves and their performance on a much wider portfolio of achievements. So whether that be the people that they employ or the service they deliver to customers or the impact they have on the local community or the world and the planet. So what's the equivalent for governments?
I think that I think that there's a couple of different examples of how things have been measurable in the past. But if you if you if you if you want to take it in its purest and simplistic form, the majority sit at there's bottom up politics and there's top down politics. And when you've got bottom up politics, you've got community engagement, you've got volunteering, you've got people who step out of their houses and help their neighbours. You have got the most amazing type of values right there. And being able to capture that data and is something that we should be trying to understand and trying to do because that bottom up politics is the bottom bar. If you think about government as a fence, then you have to think about all of the different fence poles being transport, health, blah blah blah, education, what have you. But there's a bottom bar of GDP and there's a top bar of GDP. And that top bar is the only thing that we focus on at the moment. We don't focus on the bottom bar. And that top bar has value based on finance and economics. The bottom bar has value based on kindness and neighborhood renewal and community engagement. And when you raise the bottom bar, that's when you raise everything else in society. And that's the bit that I think is missing and we're lacking at the moment. Now, we knew how to do that in COVID because we all just decided to go to the bottom bar and help everybody else. But we forgot that as soon as we then changed governments, every single election, every government changed. Everyone across the world changed, whether it was red to blue or blue to red they all changed because we moved back to an economic scale. And now I think that 2025 through the next couple of years, we really will see a return to values. I think we will see a return to that. And if we don't, then we should. Then we need to.
Yeah, and it's good to have that hope, isn't it? And you've mentioned elections, and this year has been phenomenal in terms of the number of elections and the number of people around the world involved in elections. 50% of the globe's population this year will be involved in deciding who will run their country. And it strikes me that there's a real challenge, probably more today than ever before in history, where we're balancing what we need as a country versus balancing what we need as being part of a planet. And how do you reconcile those two things when perhaps they're pulling you in different directions?
I think it's a very simple element of you go local to stay global. You you make sure that you're on the ground, you make sure that you are multicultural, you make sure that you're looking after your neighbors, you make sure that you're appreciating their differences, you make sure that you are um that you're that you're just embracing everything that you have right in front of you, and you're doing that on the ground. It's not just something that you do on a Zoom call. It's not just something that you do on social media.
Mm.
And you make sure that that authentic element of yourself is true in every part of your being.
So let me just push you a little bit further on that one, because let's imagine a hypothetical country that is reliant economically on coal production. And we know that coal production is not good for the planet. But what is this country supposed to do when it has no other means of being economically, let's say, successful or wealthy?
Oh, well, this is an economic question again. Um, and I think that, so I'm in New Zealand, as you know, and New Zealand is not dependent on coal. Um, but our ministers at the moment and have a inclining they have a want to start mining again, even although they don't need to. We could be dependent on farming. We could feed. We've got poverty here. We've got food poverty here, but we export the most amount of food to other parts of the world. Um, so there's that's what I mean, and that's what I want to come back to is stay local to think global. You look after yourself, and you then that's how you look after the world. Is stop trying to solve the problems of the planet and start solving the problems that are standing right in front of you. Mining I don't think that mining is a. I think that there's a space where there's a transition for mining, but I don't think that we need to start more of it. I think that we need to stop doing it. Countries that are dependent on mining, find something else to do. Like it's that simple. And it's not difficult because you've got a country, you've got people, you've got a land, and you've got ideas, and we've got creativity, and we've got connectivity. Find something different to do. Find a different way to contribute to the world. And that has to take, that'll have to be a transition for them. Um, and that transition will help us get away from mining. Um, but I don't think we need to start any new mining. So I wholly 100% am against mining in New Zealand because we've never needed it before. We've never had to do it. We've never wanted it. And there's no reason in the world we should be starting it now.
Mm. Is that so? Maybe I chose not such a good example because I didn't mean to get down that mine. But it's an example of how there's tension between country needs and global needs. And the metaphor that I use sometimes is imagine a spaceship with a couple of aliens in it above the planet Earth. And one says to the other, hey, they seem to be doing okay down there. Look at all that wealth that they've created over there. And the other one says, well, yeah, they've created a lot, but it seems to me like a load of it is being wasted. And if you look over there, there are people that haven't got enough food and they're dying and they haven't got clean water and they haven't got medicine. So that's weird, isn't it? And the first one says, yeah, shall we report back to base that there's no sign of intelligent life and continue the search? So that I mean, that kind of sums up for me how I think it's mad that we allow that to exist on the planet. But equally, it's no surprise because I don't think we've got an organization structure that is fit for purpose. It's a bit like running a big company with no board of directors and no CEO. You know, we're just allowing the independent functions to scrabble for limited resources and get on with it. And I'm not going to ask you a question about that because I want to move on. And so I'm really curious about the future of the world and youth. So I can imagine people listening to this who are in their younger years thinking, well, do you know what? I would love to go into politics and make a difference, but I'm totally disillusioned with people that are performing that role right now. What would you advise those young people?
Oh goodness. Well, first of all, I'm not qualified. I didn't get qualified in PPE. I didn't do politics, philosophy, and economics. I did journalism, public relations, as a degree. I found myself into politics, and it dragged me in. You do get dragged in that sense. You do it for reasons. If I'm going to be candid, and if I'm going to be open, um, and I'm going to disclose. I suffer from PTSD, from childhood neglect and childhood trauma, um, and sexual abuse. Um, the reason that I'm in politics is because if people don't step into it and with voices, with opinions, and with the things that matter, then things don't change. And when you are young, if you think that you're not ready for it, then you are. When you think that you are ready for it, you're not.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for being as so open. And let's move on to this notion of the role that, well, civic partnership, if you like. And, you know, we live in a world where if you have a vote and you're going to use it, it's really important that you're equipped to be able to make your choices. And I'm curious to hear from you about two things. One is the role of values education, and secondly, the challenge of misinformation that can be out there. And you've referenced Brexit already. So, how do we deal with those two specific matters in helping to equip people so that they can feel confident that they're making their choice?
I think that there's a diligence in that. Would be the value that I would put beside that one. I ensure that I listen to all forms of media, not just the ones that agree with my opinion. I make sure that I've got the diversity of thought in the in my research. I don't just listen to the things that I need to to help me make the decision that I've already decided to make. I challenge myself by exposing myself to as much as I can. I don't think that enough people do that. I think it's too easy for things like Facebook and other social media to be able to say, oh, this is your opinion, and therefore this is all you'll see. And I think that you have to actually make a diligent effort to go out and find opposing opinions, and disagree with them, and also listen. Um, and that otherwise you just live in an echo chamber. And that's the problem with politics and values at the moment is that echo chamber.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I'm currently working on a book project called The Humanity Code: How Values Define Our World. And what we say in that book is that the world is too big and beautiful to live in a bubble. And our bubbles, unfortunately, are getting smaller because of the algorithms just telling us what we want to look at based on what we've looked at before. And that's a really not good place to be. Okay, so final kind of serious question, and then I want to finish with a bit of something more light-hearted. But the final serious question is what does truly values-led politics look like, and what could the benefits be of that?
I I would suggest that values-led politics isn't actually necessarily led by politics. Um, should be led by culture and religion and community. So it's not politics that leads it, it's the other way around. And so what that means is if some cultures want to be autocratic, if some cultures or communities want to be democratic, if some want to be um, communist, if they want to, like whatever it is they want to do, that that diversity is important because as humans, we are a diverse race and we're not homogenous. And when we start looking for panaceas of all ills, that's when we face problems. So it's the diversity that's required. And we need to have that. I don't think that we find the answer in politics. I think that politics finds the answer in culture, community, religion, and values.
Yeah, and I think that's what I meant by values-led politics, because I'd love to see a manifesto where the party says, we believe in these values, those are central to what we believe in. And as a result, these are the policies that we've come up with. This is going to be the impact on the values that we believe in, and everything's joined up so people can have a sense of understanding from end to end. Whether we will ever see that, I don't know. And
Well, you
in
get that, Alan. You do get that. You get that in indigenous cultures. You get that in indigenous cultures. You don't get it in colonialist cultures,
yeah,
because there's a difference between community-led and individualistic-led um,
yeah.
political standpoints. So when you have an individualistic standpoint, that becomes economic and financially driven, and when you have a community standpoint, it becomes health and well-being driven. And you end up seeing health and well-being being more important than economics.
Yeah, you're so right. And again, if I make a parallel with the corporate world, I think what often happens there, and maybe this is the situation with politics actually. In the corporate world, what happens is that somebody comes up with a bright idea, right? An end that they want to achieve, and everybody's enthusiastic about it. And then what happens is that people come in and say, "Oh, we have to put process around this." And so process starts to be put in place. And in my experience, what happens is that the process becomes all consuming and the end is almost forgotten. And in a way, that's what's happening with politics. We're totally consumed with the process and we forgot what we put the process in place to achieve. Um, so that, and you kind of, I'm not going to share what you said, but you've given me a segue into this final playful element, which I want to do with you now. So I'm going to give you five pairs of words in
Right?
turn, and you have to choose one or the other. And I don't want you to spend very long thinking about it. I'd just like you to go with your gut reaction, okay? So the first one is freedom or wealth,
Freedom,
local or global,
local,
growth or compassion,
compassion,
bottom up or top down.
bottom up.
Katrina, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for the conversation, which was so informative. I hope people have enjoyed it, and I hope people have understood that there is a connection between politics and values, and it's not all about taking sides. Any final words from you?
Thank you very much for your time, Alan. I really appreciated this conversation, and it's nice to be back in the game.
Cheers. Bye.